Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ed Arnold, and I'm Vice President of Products here at LeveragePoint. I'd like to welcome all of you to another one of our monthly webinars of thought leadership in value-based strategy. Sponsored by LeveragePoint. LeveragePoint provides the only software solution for value-based pricing. We offer a cloud-based collaboration platform that supports product innovation as well as sales enablement that changes the way companies create, communicate, and capture value. Find out more about us from our website at leveragepoint.com. Now, during the webinar, if you have any specific questions or comments, please feel free to enter them in the right-hand panel in the question section. And then later on, we'll respond to as many of these questions as we can. So let me introduce today's speaker. We are delighted to have with us, once again, noted pricing thought leader and author, Dr. Stefan Liauzou. Dr. Liauzou was most recently President and CEO at Ardex Americas, and while there was voted CEO of the Year in 2012 for mid-sized companies in the Pittsburgh area. He currently runs his own consultancy and advises clients on innovation, business strategy, and value-based pricing. And he's also a prolific author of business books and articles, and is a popular speaker at corporations, conferences, and business schools in the US and in Europe. And his most recent book, The ROI of Pricing, has just come out, and we'll talk more about that a little later in the webinar. So welcome, Stefan. Glad to have you with us again. But before you get started, we wanted to have a polling question. And the polling question is up right now. How far has your company gone in adopting a value-based pricing strategy, that is, as opposed to a cost-plus or competitive pricing strategy? So if you could select one of those selections there, and in just a moment we'll share those results as we get started. But while we're waiting, I thought I would welcome Stefan again and have him begin.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining today again. While you take the poll, I just wanted to contextualize some of the information you're going to see today. We've run two surveys, separate surveys. One was at the end of 2012 on the specific topic of the ROI of pricing, which the results are presenting in the chapter in the book. So you'll see some nuggets today on that, and should be interesting for you. The second survey was also last year with LeveragePoint. It was on the state of the value-based pricing methodology, and we're going to share with you today some nuggets as well. So I just wanted to show you that. So the first survey we had 300 respondents. On the second one we had about 144. You'll see different survey results, so I'll make sure I point those separately when I show the slides. So it should be an interesting topic, and it's work in progress. As you know, it is very difficult to measure ROI of pricing, and specifically of value-based pricing. And this is something that the profession needs to work more diligently at doing, and that's what we started the process, launched the initiative about 18 months ago, and are pretty much trying to continue the work of justifying the existence of the value-based pricing methodology. So
speaking of results, we do have our poll results here, and those are on your screen right now. And what we see here is, well, it's pretty evenly split between actively engaged, starting to shift, and researching right now, with about a quarter not sure where exactly they are. So some interesting mix of participants.
Good. That's interesting results. Although we only have 30 people signed up, still people are coming in. So I'm sure we'll have a diverse group of people from different horizons, different industries, and a different level of the maturity level curve. So really the essence of the presentation is to show you a little bit of the financial impact and what has been published so far, which is, by the way, not too much. I will be honest with you. So some of the learning objectives for you is to really give you some nuggets on, if you're going to go out and try to start putting together a justification for some value-based pricing investment. What do you do? How do you get started? And how could you set up your initial pilots, for example, to be able to show some quick results and document some of what you're doing. So let's look at the first one. So let's go right in. So remember, this is a state of the value-based pricing survey. We asked respondents for their experience and not only in the current, if they use value-based pricing today, but if they don't, if they used it in the past, pretty much 70% of respondents reported a 3% or greater increase in price, average sales price, profit margin, and gross margin when using value-based pricing. So right there you have a nugget that you can use in your justification. And if you look at the actual distribution, which is actually much more interesting to look at, it is between 3 and 7%, which is a big chunk of the vast majority of respondents. And another data point that's interesting for you to see is the fact that you have people that report over 10%. And even over 16%. So when done well and done with intention and with strategic approach, then value-based pricing can seriously deliver some great results for your company. Now, obviously, how you do value-based pricing differs from company to company, so you have to put a little bit of a disclaimer there, I would say. But generally speaking, 3 to 6% is an average return, not only on price but also on incremental profit. So, and most companies are very likely to invest in value-based pricing. Actually, the number of companies adopting value-based pricing is increasing. From the first gathering of data in 2008 by Dr. Hinterhuber that showed a 17% average increase adoption rate among industrial firms, we're now down around 25%. So slowly but surely, value-based pricing is penetrating the world of pricing, and still a lot of companies do competition-based pricing and cost-based pricing. And again, there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's done, pricing is managed with intention and with discipline, you could still attain some great results. But when value-based pricing is done with the same amount of intention and strategic view, then the results are even better. So the likelihood of investment, as you could see, is high, but most of what's reported is the fact that it's difficult to make the case. Now, if you want to look at the results of value-based pricing, you really have to pay attention to not only the strategy, on the price-setting side, but also the price-getting side, which is the price realization for value-based pricing. And this is a study that was conducted by Monitor in 2004, really showing that the companies that do both not only design value-based pricing strategy very well, but also have strong execution capabilities, have really excellent top line and bottom line results. So operating profit here you could see is 1.24, the average of in the industry. So and really in the spectrum of adoption, you have from people who are doing nothing at the bottom to all the way to the value masters, which are companies that pretty much do both the strategy and the execution. Okay. So what are the difficulties in executing a value-based pricing strategy? So two types of difficulties. The first one is difficulties in making the case. What do you include? What is the scope? Do you put training in there? Do you not put training in there? So it's kind of a very fuzzy, value-based pricing has some very fuzzy boundaries that when you design a roadmap may kind of impact your overall estimation, because then you find out a year later that you still have to do a lot more training, or you have to now start training your distributors. And so it's difficult to map out fully at the beginning. The second is the difficulty in measuring the impact. And especially when you look at, okay, who does what and how do you allocate credit, or how do you measure the nuggets of improvements from sales to finance to marketing? Who measures that? When do you measure? And then how do you communicate results for pretty much credibility? Who's going to believe what you're measuring? So there are a lot of consideration when you look at value-based pricing and ROI that you really need to design upfront, and you gotta really set up a roadmap that is all-encompassing, and that goes pretty much in stages and maybe adopting a modular approach to the deployment. So this is a slide from the ROI study, and it shows that really what I was saying before, there are difficulties in measuring ROI or specific pricing activities. Now, besides value-based pricing, just pricing itself. And so an agreement scale of 1 to 7, the difficulty scale, 1 being not difficult to 7 being very difficult. You look at the top 4 here, which are pretty much close. The first one is really defining the overall incremental effect for the initiatives. So what is the actual finding, the pockets of improvement hidden in between all the programs, the moving parts that you're managing, and extracting it to calculate your ROI. The second one is setting up the proper reporting process for the ROI, and usually I recommend to do that through the pricing council. Agreeing on the definition of pricing ROI for initiatives, what goes in there, and it goes with the scoping issues that we talked about before. And then estimating the specific pricing effect of the initiative. So you see these difficulties are real, and when I talk to a lot of practitioners and specifically on the topic of ROI, it's pretty much recurrent. The same difficulties come up in the discussions. So now we looked at the same questions, but with value-based pricing activities, which is the latest survey with 144 people, 1 to 7 scale. And we look specifically, when you look at value-based pricing, what's difficult. And here the difficulty number 1 is identifying the differential value drivers. What makes us different versus competition? How do you pick the specific drivers that are measurable and maybe compelling and credible and concise? So sometimes you will find that maybe your products have a high level of differentiation, not only on service but performance. How do you pick 1 or 2? As you know, you cannot put 5 to 10 drivers in a model, so you have to really stay around 2 to 4. It's the most recommended number. But at the end of the day, you got to pick the right ones. So that's a very difficult process. Now that also tells you have to do multiple value models based on your segmentation strategy, which is point number 2. Most of the time, companies that engage in value-based pricing forget the step number 2 of value-based pricing, which is segmenting the market, because it's very difficult. Now you could do segmentation based on vertical, you could do it based on firmographics, customer size, which are what you find mostly in heavy-duty B2B markets or industrial markets. But it is difficult to start looking at user need segmentation and what the different segments might be willing to pay for. So segmenting is still a very difficult activity in value-based pricing. And surprisingly, number 3, finding competitive pricing levels. So I hear that day in, day out when I do training and conduct my engagement, is the fact that how do I find competitive prices? How do I trust that the competitive pricing is correct? Well, it's sometimes you have to use a range, sometimes you have to use a price based on the perception of your sales force and what they heard in the market. But you have to start somewhere, and there is definitely room for improvement there, as well as identifying the competitive reference value. Which one do we use in the model? So, and I go on and on, but there are difficulties, and obviously here you have clear winners as far as the rankings. Identifying value drivers and segmenting the market definitely are top 2 difficulties. So how do you measure the ROI for value-based pricing? Well, let's look at the this general survey that we conducted a while back. So what do you measure ROI for? This is a question we ask everybody who took the survey. And generally speaking, you can see here that most companies start with doing pilot projects. And that's in line with most of the transformational programs and pricing that I've seen out there, where you start with pilots and you start to measure that specific pilot ROI so that you can go on to the next big thing. Some people do comprehensive, the ROI for the overall corporate pricing program, which is actually might be a little simpler because you usually have a cost center for pricing and you can extract the cost. Then it is probably more difficult to go out and isolate the effect of pricing. So I'll let you read this, but very few people at the bottom actually measure the impact of the overall pricing team, the individuals, and then the hiring of a new pricing professional. So that's interesting to see as well. And if you look at the deployment of value-based pricing strategies, only 24% of people declare actually doing a specific ROI measurement for that. So what do you do tomorrow? Let's say tomorrow you want to start doing some justification for value-based pricing, and as I mentioned that at the beginning, it's one of these difficult exercises but you have to start somewhere. So one of the recommendations we have in the ROI book is to start designing experiments. And actually, many companies do this, whether it's a experiment at the divisional level, or experiment at the product level, or a specific pilot in a defined scope. And really, you have to show, the cost of doing nothing, which is, what we do today, which should be competition-based or cost-based pricing, and what you plan on doing tomorrow, or what you're actually starting doing for 3 or 6 months. And we've done that in my experience, in my previous career stages, I would say, and I can show you a nugget here, which is we introduced a product, and it was a specific product, somewhat not a disruptive, but a strong incremental innovation. And we looked at the incremental gross margin, gross profit over 12 months using cost-based pricing, which is making the decisions that we usually made using cost-based pricing. And then we went back and redesigned our pricing strategy based on value-based pricing. And here was a simple calculation, a tracker that we implemented based on our incremental gross profit. And you could see here the significant performance, $250,000 in incremental gross profit by doing a real good job at doing value-based pricing, which is segmenting, measuring the value, communicating the value, versus still incremental gross profit because the product was innovative, but the innovation was pretty much captured on the cost plus with some of the premium approach. We want to be over competition, but we want to make a margin. So if you could do this in your company, start with an innovation product, start with 2 or 3 products, do a 6-month experiment, and then show the result. And show the incremental result and track the cost that you're spending on it, which is maybe some time, some preparation, because initially you will do that with the existing assets you have in the company. Now imagine the power of this, that if you do that with one product, you can generate $190,000 in incremental gross profit for one product. And if your company launches 20, 30, 40, 50 new products, then you could project a potential to management. Now, the key learning there was to measure before and after, to track scientifically the contribution through the innovation and the pricing councils, and then really to communicate and get buy-in from anybody and celebrate. So that was a very quick experiment that if you want to read more, it's one of the chapters in the book on how we did it. And but it shows it's powerful. The quick win here of $190,000 in gross profit, it's amazing, and it pays for 10 times over the amount of time and energy we spent in this specific experiment. So, I know I went fast, and I just want to leave room for questions at the end, because every single one of you know about value-based pricing, and you've probably done your research. And here we've shown that there is some definite potential in deploying value-based pricing, but you have to be very strategic in how you design your experiments, how you scope your projects, how you measure it through the pricing council, and then reporting it, and then moving on to the next project. But so I wanted to kind of find some of these companies that do that religiously, and here you have some of the best value-based companies in the world. And you recognize the logos here, and they don't specifically use the leverage point software, but they actually are known for doing value-based pricing. The Hilti, the Granger, SKF is well known for its value-based approaches. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think they have in common? Well, what they have in common is not only doing value-based pricing, but doing value-based strategies, which starts with innovation, goes into value-based marketing, then in value-based pricing, and in value-based selling. So you will capture the impact of value-based pricing if you adopt an integrated and holistic approach to value-based strategies. Because if you don't have innovation that creates differentiation, and you don't manage segmentation in a very purposeful way, then you could do all you want in value-based pricing. You still will have some lack of innovation, lack of differentiation, and issues with your segmentation. So really, the message here is, as we mentioned before with the value masters, I think you really have to look at value management as a comprehensive approach. And these companies here do it well, from the innovation all the way to value-based selling. And the result is very significant. So I went out there and looked at the annual report, and I wanted to share with you some of these amazing results. So if you look at 3M, as you know, 3M is a very innovative company, also has an army of pricing people doing the IT, the finance, and the marketing / value work. But their results last year were amazing. 21% EBIT as a percentage of sales, reinforcing the fact that you need to do just more than value-based pricing. You have to do value-based strategy as a whole. Now, Grainger is a distributor that is growing fast track, and they are almost reaching the $10 billion company with a 15% EBIT margin. A distributor making 15% EBIT margin. And Grainger is often mentioned as one of the best-in-class dynamic value-based pricing company. Now they also have amazing technology and amazing segmentation, and the dynamism, the dynamic dimension of their value-based pricing approach really allows for capture of optimized value when you're on their site. Eastman Chemical, I don't have to repeat. Eastman Chemical is one of the reference in value-based strategies with outstanding results, and they're one of the best-in-class chemical companies, if not the best-in-class chemical company in the world. So I'll let you read the rest, but the goal of this presentation and the goal of the book that we put together is really to start showing all these nuggets, so that for you as pricing professionals or as consultants in the pricing field, you can start carrying the message that yes, value-based pricing positively impact your performance. And you have nuggets. So you have consulting reports that show you an 8%, around 3 to 4%, sometimes up to 8% increase in EBIT. You have these surveys that we conducted here with Leverage Point and independently in the past that really show the impact of conducting the ROI analysis and deploying value-based pricing. On the academic side, some papers are published now more and more on showing the positive impact of value-based pricing on firm performance. So the combination of all of these should give you the confidence as pricing practitioners to go out and promote value-based pricing as a methodology that can seriously improve profit. Now, obviously, remember these two dimensions of that are difficult to do: the scoping and then making the case. And I think there is a lot of misconception that value-based pricing is like a switch button on and off. It's a transformation. You really have to change a lot of things in the business to do it. And this is why I referred in my previous webinar, maybe 2 webinars ago, on the fact that you probably have to infiltrate value-based pricing in your company before you go full blast in the core business. So our intention is to really give you all these nuggets, and you will get copies of the slides. They'll be downloadable on the website, and you'll have access to the book, which also shows all these consulting surveys and everything, the state of what exists in the ROI of pricing, so that you can use it and feel free to refer to them when you go make the case. And this is our contribution with Dr. Interhuber to the field of pricing and helping pricing to compete better with manufacturing, innovation, and technology in making the case for their investment requirements. So such a little bit of the story. It's a little fast, but there's a lot more out there on my website or in the book that I recommend that you read in the future. And that's it for today.
So thank you, Stefan. Again, a very thought-provoking presentation as always, and I particularly liked your description of the experiment. Very, very practical example of measuring an ROI, which a lot of people are interested in, and it's great to see a specific example of that. So we did get a few questions that came in during your presentation. And by the way, to other participants out there, there's still time to add your question to the list. Again, just add that in the questions panel. But before that, I wanted to talk a little bit about your new book, which has just been published, which I would say would be an excellent resource to anyone who's interested in exploring this topic a little bit more deeply. One of the reasons why is because you've got chapters, contributing chapters from several pricing experts. We've highlighted a few of these of interest. The first chapter I found very interesting by Roger Best about different value-based pricing ROI methodologies, and then of course making the business case from you, Stefan. Now two lucky participants today will be getting a free signed copy of this book. And if you want to increase your chances, especially for those who are listening right now, we will be giving away a third signed copy provided if you complete the post-webinar survey. So 3 chances to win, and the winners will be notified Friday by email. But I wanted to take a moment just to describe this chapter, Making the Case for Value-Based Pricing, by yours truly. And if we move to the next slide, what you'll see here is, in a sense, jumping right to the bottom line, as it were. In the chapter we put together an economic value estimation model for using a solution like Leverage Point based on the actual experiences of our customers. And for this chapter, we studied 4 of our most successful enterprise customers, and I would say they would be in that value master category that Stefan showed in the survey, the old Monitor survey, the top 5%. Now, what I'd like to say here is that you'll see a very large, almost unbelievable ROI number, you know, over 2,000%. And as they say in the car commercials, you know, actual mileage may vary. But what I would say is that, you know, all of our customers renew with us. So you can argue that there's got to be something behind this. And one way to interpret this value chart is that, you know, there's a huge value potential in scaling value-based pricing in an organization that truly commits itself both on the innovation side as well as the execution side. So you need both of those together to make that happen. The book chapter talks more about some of the specific best practices that the companies used. And of course, if you're more interested in learning more about this, you're welcome to contact us for more information. So thank you for listening to that, and I'd like to get to the questions right now, and it looks like a few new ones have come in, Stefan. The first one is actually a pretty basic one that we don't answer very often because we assume that everybody knows what value-based pricing is, but I was hoping, Stefan, if you can just define briefly what is a value-based pricing approach?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's actually one of the questions we had in the survey. You know, it's important to understand that many people have different definitions, but we adopt the the 6-step approach, which starts with understanding your competition to running the EVE process, all the way to value messaging, which is a broader version. So there is, you know, it's not TCO, total cost of ownership, it's not EVE itself, but it's a broader approach going from segmentation to value selling. Now you have various definitions out there, and but I usually write about the 6 steps, and I define value-based pricing as a methodology, like you would define Six Sigma as a lean, cost improvement methodology. So Some people define it as an orientation, others as a tactic, so you get all kinds of definition. But it is important that it is a process or methodology that will change your go-to-market strategy, including segmentation, understanding your competitors, extracting your differential value, measuring it, messaging it, packaging it in communication campaign, and then delivering it for sales teams for value selling. That's the way I would define it.
Yes, thank you, Stefan. And in a real short way, I like to describe it is basing your pricing or your product strategy on customer value. So the value means the value you provide to the customer. Okay, the next one is a question about change management challenges as you move from a traditional pricing approach to a value-based pricing approach. And I know we've talked a lot about this before, Stefan, but what are you saying that the biggest challenges are in making that transition?
Well, I would say anytime you're going to do a pricing program, you're going to face change management issue. I think I definitely recognize that value-based pricing is much more complicated because you're really changing the entire go-to-market strategy. So it's much more transformational because you can't just do pricing. You have to do segmentation and value-based marketing, and then you have to start do the marcom differently. So it is changing a lot of the processes that are in place. And unless you have a fire in the house or a definite need to do it because your company is sinking, then if you're successful, it's difficult to do it. And if you're successful with cost-based pricing and the sales force knows it, then you're going to have to double the amount of investment in change management, which it's an important consideration when you do your scoping. And most of the time, companies forget to put a change management module in the value-based pricing deployment. Now they'll do training, don't get me wrong, and they'll do project management, but a component on change management, which is changing the behaviors, coaching, additional layer of communication, the reward system, this can be costly, and you need to make sure it's in the scope. So definitely change is important.
You know, Stefan, it's interesting, at least in some of the experiences that I have, and I'm wondering if you've run into this as well, that there are usually some people who already have this value-based philosophy or approach in their work, right? So usually your best salespeople have their own version of what we would call value-based selling, even though they may not call it that. And that, really part of the process, and at least getting started, is trying to group those people up and focus them on in a particular project, especially in the form of an experiment like you laid out earlier. That yes, on a large scale, change management is an issue, but really there are people who are looking to do more customer value in their day-to-day decision making that they could start to do right now, and it's just a question of giving them the tools and the perspective to start realizing that. I was just curious what your comments are about that, Stefan.
I agree with you that in every company there is going to be a group of people that are already doing it. Yeah. You just have to find them and leverage their skills. And if they're in sales, then you could use them as champions of the cause and use them to share testimonial success stories and their own techniques, so that it doesn't come just from the pricing or the marketing folks, but it comes from the sales guys as well. And they can explain their simple methods. So keep it simple, and you leverage them to kind of do a little bit of evangelism on value strategies.
Right, absolutely. So this next question is a little bit more, I would say, technical, which is, how might you determine the model reference price with a new to the world product? So in terms of giving that a context, in the value model, you're always comparing your value to your next best competitive alternative. And the question here, which is a very good question, is what do you do if you've got something totally new? How do you, what do you compare it to?
Okay, so if you do something totally new, which is disruptive or radical innovation, then the reference value most likely will not be there, the direct reference value. But generally speaking, when you do a radical innovation, you're solving a problem. So you have to look at your gains and the pains that you're addressing, and then you got to find exactly what you're replacing. And that will be an indirect process, an indirect experience, or something that the customers don't have today that you could save them time with. So, for example, if you create a new app that saves someone half an hour of daily management of something, then the reference is at a half hour. So you really have to look upstream in your front end of innovation, and you could use the various techniques that are available in the innovation science, such as Kano, for example. The Kano methodology can help you identify these customer experiences that you are actually uncovering. In the B2B world, then there is usually an indirect process, and you're going to have to map it out, go do customer observations, do ethnographic research, and refine a process, and then use the traditional conjoint or concept testing approaches to kind of nail a little bit of a concept that will become your, the substitute for your reference value. So there's always something. You got to find it, and it's never radical that it's out of the blue coming up and not changing something. So you're changing behaviors, you're replacing something that's dysfunctional, you are improving people's life, and you just have to find what you're doing. And that job is becoming the reference value.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, value is always relative, right? You're always comparing your value against a next best competitive alternative. But sometimes, what you're comparing to doesn't have a clear reference value, and that is very true with innovative solutions. And I would count leverage point in there as well. When we do value models for our customers, and what I showed on that earlier slide, you'll notice that there is no reference value in there, because you're really talking about replacing what is commonly done manually by individuals using spreadsheets in an organization. You could probably sit down and try to calculate how much they actually spend on it, but it's not a number that's really relevant to the person who's evaluating it. Much better to focus on the value drivers, the amount of time and the better decisions and all of those good things. So, in cases where a customer has a reference value in mind and they're comparing you against that, you absolutely need to include it. In some cases, you may not need it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So another question here. I guess they're looking for some what I would call tradecraft or tips. What would you say are your top tips for coming up with an ROI for value?
Okay, so first, there is no secret formula. There is no silver bullet. I think what you have to do is get a consensus on the measurement in your pricing council. And in your pricing council, you will have a variety of functions: sales, finance, pricing, marketing, etc. And you need to define a consensus on the way you're going to measure and track the incremental effect and the incremental cost. That's number one. Then you got to use the proper formula. Number two, and that's chapter 1 of the book. And then you got to track, measure. You have to have a discipline of measurement and defining the right KPIs, tracking them, creating a cockpit, and then reporting through the pricing council. I think just doing a pricing ROI or value-based pricing ROI on your own as a pricing professional or value professional is not enough. You have to have a consensus and buy in the definition and the measurement method so that everybody agrees to it. Otherwise, you're going to run into, oh, well, this is the result of sales, this is the result of pricing, this is the result, and everybody's going to try to get credit for it. So it's an upfront effort that is well needed. Okay, and so maybe our last question here is, earlier you talked about
some of the investments that companies are making in a value-based approach. I was just wondering if you can comment on what are the sort of the solutions companies are looking for to get started on it. I mean, sometimes it's an in-house effort, but sometimes people are looking for help from outside. So what sorts of solutions have you seen that companies are choosing?
Well, solutions as far as software, you mean, or?
Any solution that would help a company get started in value-based pricing.
Well, I would say for me, you have to really start with innovation, and you look at your portfolio of innovation today, and what's in the pipeline in multiple stages of your stage gate or your NPD process, and start measuring the value for this. The second is challenge your segmentation process and work with your. I know it's as a pricing professional, you may not be realizing how much you influence segmentation, but work with the marketing folks and some of the high-level leadership in sales and discuss segmentation. You don't sell the same way to all customers, and at the end, if you have the right segmentation approach, then the chances of your value-based pricing strategy for some of the segments will be paying off very well. So those are some tips.
Okay, well, one last question slipped in, and I love this question, that's why. So how do you create value for a commodity product? How do you do value-based pricing for commodities?
Yeah. So you got to find the where the differentiation resides. If you're in business today, that means you're doing something right. People in B2B don't buy from companies just for the fun of buying. They're buying for a reason. You got to find that reason, and you got to find the job that you're solving, or the issues that you're resolving for the customers, and what you're doing for them. And sometimes it's price, no doubt. But most of the time, it'll be outside of the product. If you have a very commoditized, quote-unquote, product range, then service will be important, corporate services will be important, brand will be important, and then you have maybe other intangibles that you will have to measure, such as the size of the company or the nature of your company, the way you're structured. But bottom line, it's an important point that you have to find your differentiation, and sometimes it's hidden somewhere in your company, and you have to identify it and then measure it. Now, obviously, the more differentiation you have, the higher the chances of deploying value-based pricing and being successful at it. This is what research shows, in scholarly research shows. That doesn't mean you cannot do value-based pricing for more commoditized or general-purpose products. You just have to understand where your differentiation resides.
Absolutely. Great answer. Great answer. All right. So let me move on to announcing our next webinar in March. We're going to have with us Chris Provines, who's a noted value expert in the healthcare industry, and he'll be talking about winning with the new buyer, smart strategies to sell and defend your value. It's based on a new book that he has. And I think this is a topic that's not only very relevant to healthcare, but no matter what industry you're in, I think the content here will be quite useful and interesting. So look for an email announcement about this webinar, which I'm sure will be heading to your inbox very, very soon. Okay, so that's all the time that we have left for today. Again, we will be sharing the slides from this presentation with all of you soon. Please complete the post-webinar survey. That will increase your chances for a book. If you want to send us any questions, comments, suggestions, you can reach us here at Leverage Point. The contact information is up on the screen. And so, Stefan, thanks again for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, and thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next month.